So folks, listen, thank you all so very, very, very much for coming. I think it's imperative that you know and understand how much all of us, I know these families, appreciate the outpouring of support that you've been extending, and that by virtue of the fact that you're here, continue to extend. And we're gonna call on that support, because they need it. The other thing is I would say to you all, I think it's important that we give these families a round of applause for meeting the moment, having the courage to stand up. So next, I'm going to ask Brother Muhammad to come and just sort of introduce all of the organizations that are represented here today. There are quite a few, and so we want to make sure we do homage to each of those. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Brother Muhammad, spokesman for the City of Aurora. Bring you greetings on behalf of Mayor Richard Irvin, who couldn't be here, but we certainly have representation from the City of Aurora. Just to announce some of the partners and collaborators who are here with us, and I call your organizational name, if you can stand up. We want the young men and our families to see this community-wide support. First, thanks to the team here at the Cathedral of Grace, St. John Church. Give a round of applause to Pastor. Also supported today by DuPage ME Pastor Miller. Round of applause, please. Hold applause, and we announce your group if you can please stand. We're represented today by the City of Aurora. Reps from the city, you can hold the applause. City of Aurora staff members and City Council members. Also City Council members of Naperville who are here with us. DuPage NAACP, you can all please stand. Unity Partnership is with us. Boys to Men is with us, in addition to the young guys who are here. Community Youth Development, the Mathises are here. District 204, School District 204 represented Congressman Bill Foster's office by a number of staff members, Hillary and Maria. The Fox Valley Park District is with us. Illinois State Board of Education member, Cynthia Latimer. EXP Realty. City of Bolingbrook is here. Quad County Urban League, Ms. Theodie Gillespie. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, please stand. Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. LCLAA and UNI too, thank you for being here. The Aurora Human Relations Commission. The Aurora Actioneers. Progressive Harambit. Together is Better Alliance. Kids Team Rider. Stand and March. At Risk Mentoring. In the Episcopal Diocese of Chicago. Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Let's give everyone a round of applause. Of course, we came out today at the call of a leader and one who definitely has taken this charge, not this case, but many, who helps to keep us moving forward. We have to give a big round of applause to Attorney Candy Lamb.
Obviously, if you're here, you know what took place, or at least you might think you know, but most importantly, you're here now and we're going to get the real story. And I think it's imperative that that happens. And after Justin Vale and Marcus Riley speak on what took place, what happened to them, then I'm going to talk to you about some of the goals that we have. Now, this is not a comprehensive list of goals that we have, but we certainly have some real concrete objectives, and we want to make sure that we continue dialogue for the purposes of obtaining those objectives. And so we'll go into that as well. And then lastly, we'll begin to take questions from you. So that's kind of how we'll order this. But without further ado, I'm going to ask that Justin Vale first address how this situation took form.
Could you step up to the microphone?
Good morning, and thank you for everybody that came out today. We really appreciate your support. So obviously we're here today to talk about the incident that happened Saturday, October 26th at the Buffalo Wild Wings, 79th and 79 and 59 in Naperville. So we were going there. We were taking our kids there on that night. We had played the kids had played a few basketball games that day. One of the kids, Mike, who's here with us today, it was actually his birthday. So after the basketball games, we had went to a fun center in Naperville, and then after that, all the kids were hungry, so we wanted to take them out to eat. So we went into Buffalo Wild Wings, and I was actually the first one to walk in the door. And as I walked in the door, I was greeted by the host, and the hostess came to me and asked me, "How many are in your party?" And I told them we had 15. So the host said, "Okay, let me take a second, walk over to and get set up." So I originally had told them 15, and I realized we actually had a few more than expected, so we actually had 18. So I walked over to the host who was setting the tables, and I said, "Excuse me, we actually have 18." So I wanted to make sure that he was set up to accommodate us. So I walked back up to the front. 1 or 2 minutes passed, and the host comes back up front, and he says, or he asked me, "What race are you?" So he asked me what race I was, and I immediately I was appalled. I was astonished. I was in a restaurant trying to take my family, our friends and kids, to a restaurant, and I was being asked what race I was. So I was immediately astonished. I was even asked this question, but I responded, "What does that matter?" And so the host said, "Well, we have a regular customer here who doesn't want to sit around black people." Okay. So at this point, this is a very tough time for us. So I just told him we're gonna go ahead and sit down. And at this point, there's a lot of things racing through my mind. I'm surprised. I feel disrespected. I actually, and I don't even know what to say because nothing like this has ever happened. So we go to take a seat. We kind of file in with our large party and go to sit down. We're sitting right behind this customer, this racist customer, this racist regular customer who knowingly is racist by the staff, and we sit right behind him very uncomfortably, and we sit down and take a seat at the table. And at this point, this is where I shared with Marcus and the rest of the adults kind of what was going on, and they were immediately astonished as well and surprised and almost thought I was kind of making it up, but we could realize there's some tension in the room because that racist customer continued to look back at us and give us some dirty looks. We did not speak with them, but we could tell that he did not want us there. Us being blacks, biracial, just a very unique and diverse and happy group. And obviously this bigot of a customer did not want us sitting there in a public establishment where we were wanted. So then a couple minutes went by while we were sitting there waiting, and one of the managers that came over to us, this gentleman came over to us, and he says, speaks to Marcus and I, and comes and kneels down at the side of the table and says, "Excuse me, but we're going to have to move you guys. This table is reserved." Okay. So I'm gonna let Marcus share a little bit further on that story.
How's everybody doing? Just to piggyback off of what Jesse said and shed a little bit of light about myself. This group that you see behind me is sincere to me because not only do I coach, mentor, and lead these kids, I've grown up with a lot of their parents, right? So I carry the responsibility of looking out, right, for the community, looking out for the kids, and it extends well beyond this group that you see behind me. So it's passionate to me. So when we discuss this matter and discuss these individuals behind me, it brought tears to my eyes after the incident. And I'm gonna get into where Justin went, but it brought tears to my eyes to the point where when I walked out that restaurant that night, I called my mother and I couldn't even speak. She answered the phone, it's dead silence, right? It's me with tears. She says, what's wrong? I said, I'm just so frustrated, right? Because not only do I carry the weight of setting an example on a day-to-day basis for this body that's behind me, right? But I now gotta explain what being a black man is, right? I raised 2 black children. I was raised by 2 black parents, right? I have black grandfathers and grandmothers, right? So the most difficult situation was explaining it, because these kids need answers, and I'm always that guy to give it to them, right? So how do we have this conversation? 1, right? How important is this conversation? 2, how delicate is this conversation? 3, right? Because the message not only has to be delivered, but it has to make sense. And if you look at this group that stands behind me, nobody's older than 12, right? And it's as young as 5. So applying that message to a body of children that's that age group, and in between that age group, I'm sure it's difficult for everybody in this room, right? Even those that speak as a profession. How do you hit home? How do you translate this message, right? And we're patrons of Buffalo Wild Wings on a regular basis, right? We go play football, we go play basketball. I'm involved in everything they do. So going back to the story, we were seated, like Justin said. John comes over and he says, you know, what he says about, unfortunately, the tables have been reserved. We have to move your party. And he said, we have to move your party. So at that point, I looked at John right in his eyes and said, John, I know what's going on. I've been informed by your staff that this man is racist. This couple, not just this man, this couple was racist, are racist. And I will refuse to move because of the color of my skin. So let's really sit back and listen to what we're talking about right now, what you're asking us to do, because I'm not willing to do that. Okay? John looks at me with the blanks of stares, looking for words, right? And I'm looking at him, eye to eye. He says he apologizes, right? Says, I'm sorry, you're right. He walks away from the table. At that point, he walks away from our table, goes to the table of the patrons, right? And has a seat, pulls out a chair, and sits with this couple, right? So I can only assume that conversation. Can't tell you what it was verbatim, but we all get it, right? So he's probably having a conversation of, hey, these people don't want to move. What should I do? That's hearsay. That's assumption, right? So he's joined by Hannah, another manager at the Buffalo Wild Wings. She pulls up a seat with John and his couple, right? They continue to have conversation and discussion. So after they recap and finish with them, they come back to the table with us, right? And they greet us. So I look at Hannah and I say, Hannah, I just want to let you know the conversation that John and I had, because at this point I had realized that Hannah is John's superior, right? So the conversation's changed. Like, okay, so you're going to be the one that's going to handle the situation in the most appropriate way. That's what I was convinced of that, right? While I'm talking to Hannah, John tells Ashley a completely different story, right? So now I'm dialed into John and Ashley's conversation. As he's telling her, I assumed that these tables were reserved. I didn't say that you guys had to move. So I immediately left the conversation with Hannah and joined into John and Ashley's conversation, because he was the most dishonest guy that I had ran across in that Buffalo Wild Wings that night. He lacked integrity at that point with me right there. Just went out the window. So I told him, John, that's not the conversation that you and I had. You told me these seats were reserved. You told me we have to move. Let's be clear, right? So John, another blank stare, the same blank stare he gave me when he told me we had to move, right? So Hannah, are you aware of this couple? Oh no, I'm not aware. They are regulars, but you know, our employees gossip, right? Employees don't gossip about, they do gossip, right? about things that happen in the restaurant, sure. But gossip is not something of a racial magnitude. We don't gossip about racism. It's real. We experienced it. These alleged allegations that you guys been fed and you guys been reading about and seeing on Facebook and on the media, it's not alleged, it's confirmed. You see it, you feel it, it's real, it's right here. I'm speaking, right? This is me, this is us. I represent everything, I represent everybody at this table, right? Because this happened. So going into that, Hannah says, you know what? We were talking about, I said, so what would command your attention and John's attention? Because you guys are running this restaurant right now, right? So what commands your attention for both of you to sit at this table with this couple, right? Because we got a restaurant to run, right? I can't have two senior managers sitting at a table with one couple. We got a restaurant. Everybody does business, right? We got a restaurant to run, right? Oh, okay. So yeah, they were telling me about a Walmart experience. Oh, is that right? Okay. Well, I said at this point, Hannah, you're drowning because you're just as dishonest as John was, right? Now, I only can assume what that conversation was like because I wasn't sitting at the table. But we all know, right? John and I just had the conversation about us not wanting to move. You know, John and Hannah sit at the table with the patrons that are racist, right? It makes sense. So at that point, Hannah and John comes back to the table. We're having a conversation. We're just really trying to soak in what's going on. So Hannah actually tells me at this point, you're raising your voice, and if John feels hostile, we got to stop this conversation. And I said, I'm raising my voice because John just blatantly lied to my family and myself about the conversation. So at that point, we asked for a few minutes, and for Hannah to excuse us. She leaves and goes to the back. Collectively, as a group, we discuss what's the next move, right? So we said, you know what, we're getting up, we're leaving. You know, at this point, drinks have came, appetizers came, we sent it all back. We said, you know what, we're gonna leave. We're walking out, right? Justin and I made the decision. The group agreed. We got up and left. As we're getting up to leave, patrons are hugging Ashley. The staff embarrassed, a lot of them, right? One of the staff members in tears, crying as we're walking out, right? One of the kids, a couple of the kids, Coach, what's going on? Coach, we getting kicked out? Said, no, we're not getting kicked out. We're just not spending our money here. We're not appreciated here. We're on the way out. As we make it to the front, the staff member I was saying that was crying, he went against company policy to give a phone number for us to reach out. And as we walked out, I got in the car with 6 kids having to explain what just happened.
I think one of the points that he made is very important. It is imperative that we as a community, including the media, acknowledge the reality that you cannot refer to this as an alleged incident. It is a confirmed incident. If you refer to it as an alleged incident, what you're doing is you're giving space, you're providing space for those who want to deny this having happened to do so. And we can't do that any longer. What I will tell you is that, and I'm sure that you know, that the response that we've gotten from Buffalo Wild Wings is that we have elected to terminate the 2 employees, the 2 managers. And we've also decided to institute sensitivity training. It's important that you understand that we're not surprised that they fired the managers. That's what they should have done. We're not surprised that you are instituting sensitivity training. What we're surprised by is that you didn't have any already in place. We are looking to try and make sure that we do everything we can to keep the lines of communication open with Buffalo Wild Wings, because we are hoping, in fact, we are expecting that they will be good corporate citizens and that they will take this opportunity to do the right thing. They have an opportunity to be trailblazers right now, where they can show other corporate community participants what it is to stand up to racism. We're calling on them to do it. We are calling on them to do it. Now, we have some very practical applications that can be applied as to how you can go about doing so. The first is, we expect that they're going to implement employee screening. When you're hiring somebody, implement employee screening. Ask for examples of how those candidates themselves have exemplified inclusion before you hire them. Ask how a candidate might deal with a racially charged situation before you hire them. Ask a candidate what their feelings are about inclusion, race, ethnicity, before you hire them. Second, during the employment interviews, we want Buffalo Wild Wings to inform potential employees that there's a corporate expectation that they'll be required to exhibit racial sensitivity when they're on the job, before you hire them. We're looking for an employee handbook to expressly illustrate that there is and to memorialize that there is a zero tolerance for issues regarding racial bigotry and bigotry of all kinds. And that there be sign-offs that the employees have to sign in affirmation and recognition of that obligation as a condition of employment. We're looking for clearly defined definitions as to what zero tolerance means. If you engage in bigoted conduct, you shall be fired. We're interested in an employee hotline so that when employees at a particular store see bigotry, they can call district and regional managers and report it so that it is dealt with. We understand that the employee that shared with them what was going on was written up and sent home. Was written up and sent home for doing the right thing. We're expecting that there be signage in break rooms that reminds people of the importance of inclusion and the importance of walking away from bigotry. And when you see it, stand up against it. We are interested in seeing Marcus and Justin and the individuals that were subjected to this be included in the efforts to train. They should be ambassadors to teach these folks that are going to be employees what real life situations look like, so that there is a face instead of being able to think of this in the abstract. And lastly, what we are looking for is we are looking for Buffalo Wild Wings to establish an accountability system to ensure compliance with these things. It is imperative that when you tell us that you're banning a couple, but won't tell us who they are.
Speak.
Well, how do we know?
Speak.
If you're telling us you're banning a couple, we'd like to know how. How are you going to ensure that that takes place? These are the conversations we look forward to having with Buffalo Wild Wings. I will tell you, it's been asked of me, are we going to file suit? I told you before, this is a perfect opportunity for Buffalo Wild Wings to be a good corporate citizen. You don't have to file a lawsuit if there's disagreement, if there's not disagreement. There is no need to file a lawsuit if there's no disagreement. Buffalo Wild Wings, if there's no disagreement on this not being right, if you agree with us that this should have never happened, we look forward to talking to you further. Pastor Miller, from a spiritual standpoint, I'm looking forward to you talking to us and addressing us.
Thank you, Attorney Lambert, and thank you for your courage. As Sandy Bland's pastor, I've seen you work on their behalf. So much can be said about what has occurred, but I will not go into history. I will address the current situation. Systemic racism. When I listen to how 2 employees in authority, not 1, 2 conferred with the bigot, while the customer, the paying customer, had to leave. I thought of the Emmanuel 9 people at Charleston who were killed at Bible study. And the murderer was given a hamburger because he was hungry before they took him to jail. If you watch the pictures, you'll see when they approached his car, they holstered their guns before they even know. Systemic racism. And the horror and terror that black people have lived in this country from incipiency. Our churches have been bombed. Children have died at Sunday school. And I want to applaud this family for the civility that they exhibited in the face of I'm at a loss. There was a time, most of the white people who are listening may not know, but those of us who've grown up in the horror and terror of it, there was a time when fair-skinned got more acceptance in the white community. But you see how far it's gone now. Am I right, somebody? Fair-skinned. But now I'm looking here, and I'll tell you, there's no way to understand the extent to which things have progressed in this country. I will end by saying, as a Christian pastor, forgiveness, I hope the country will hear this, is different than consequences. You can forgive somebody, but you will never get a change if accountability is not put in place. And I'm praying for the families that take my seat of those 2 people who were fired. Here they were systemically locked in something. And now they lost their job because of this felon who was sitting there. And they don't, where will they get another job after that? And it's a shame that they should suffer like these police who are going to jail now, who have been brainwashed with a culture and to systemic racism, and then they're sitting wondering what happened. So I'm praying for those individuals, but I am so thankful that I can stand with this group of people and this family. And let me tell you something, Buffalo Wild Wings. If you spilled the drink, you'd give me a dessert free. This is worth a little more than a dessert.
Could you identify yourself? Could we have your name?
Reverend Dr. James F. Miller, the pastor, DuPage African Methodist Episcopal.
All right, so we thought we would open it up for questions at this point.
So can I start, is there going to be, I know you said before you talk lawsuit, you want to actually talk to the company, but are you thinking about a lawsuit?
I'm thinking
Could you
about.
speak up to the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I sincerely mean this. I sincerely mean this. It's too important to all of these folks and the community at large. We are looking to change things. Okay. And so
Unless people get, I hate to use the word punish, but unless they're facing some kind of disciplinary action.
there is no question about the fact that they need to be held accountable. But that does not mean that it has to come in the form of a lawsuit. That will depend on their posture, not ours. And I hope, and I truly expect that they are going to appreciate the gravity of this situation. When the governor of the state of Illinois understands how significant this is.
So they've already said some of the things you were asking for, employee screening, accountability, sensitivity training. They've already said they're going to zero tolerance, they're gonna do some of that.
No,
So
they haven't.
that's-
No, they haven't.
They said it in the statement.
I read the statement. Okay. What I know right now is that that statement looks like statements I've seen hundreds of times. What I don't know is how things get implemented. What I don't know is what are they going to do to change when they hire employees.
So you will want
So-
to sit at the table with them.
Absolutely. I think that's the only way to build consensus. I think that's the only way to change things fundamentally. They need to hear and see the face of bigotry so they can feel it. Because when you feel it, you know it's real.
But for these families though, I mean, they went through something so horrific that they'll never forget. How do they sort of move on from this if this company's not really, you know what I mean, gonna help in any way?
That's the tragedy of it. But you know, look at it this way. They can't be silent and let it fester. And they have to talk about it.
Right.
And you should talk about it to the people who did it to you.
Mr. Lambert, obviously you're not satisfied so far with the response from Buffalo Wild Wings or the parent company Inspire brand, which is just essentially talking to you and talking to us with statements that are from a spokesperson. I'd like you to contrast this situation or compare it to what happened, if you'll remember, with the police officers and the patrons that went into the Starbucks in Philadelphia about a year ago. Two African-American men were basically told to leave for no good reason whatsoever, and that turned into a very similar kind of situation as this, but it turned into an absolute public relations nightmare for Starbucks, another big company, big service company, and it did lead to some change with Starbucks. So if you can compare and contrast these situations and put it on some sort of a perspective.
Thank you for that. You're right that there are elements that seem to mirror one another, in this case in the NAP. I think that the answer to the question is true partnership, which is what we are looking to do. You can't have partnership unless you're at the table, and that's why we want to be at the table. We want to make sure that we continue dialogue. We want to make sure that we can hold them accountable. We want to watch their training. We want to play a role in their training. We want to make sure that the ambassadors in this situation are a part of that training. So when they go into a community that's not in Chicagoland area, in a more homogenous community, and they can see ambassadors and talk about real life situations, what happens is that those people who think this to be abstract feel it and know it.
Well, one of the situations in Philadelphia was that there was video of the situation. In this case, there was a Facebook posting that has gone kind of viral in its own way, with just a single photo and a description from the Ball family. Are you worried that this does not have the same kind of impact just simply because there isn't this kind of visceral evidence that all these other folks behind you felt?
Well, there's no question about the fact that when there is video, that it is extremely helpful, right? Because it's a very difficult thing to deny. But one of the things that we're looking for in the statement that Buffalo Wild Wings makes is that they acknowledge that this happened. One of the things that we're looking for from the media and from all those who talk about this, that you acknowledge that this happened. That's why we say this is not alleged. It is confirmed. These babies experienced it. Their parents had to ride in cars to explain it. Wives and husbands had to look at each other and say what they had to say, how they supported each other, try and describe that they were trying to be supportive. They don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. There's all kinds of things that are going on in their minds. This is real. It happened. And we have to call it that. And we need Buffalo Wild Wings to acknowledge that it happened. The fact that you fired somebody is ambiguous. Be clear.
Maybe it's not so surprising given this current culture and state of affairs we're living in the last couple of years especially. But in the 21st century, would you have ever thought maybe Justin or Marcus can get up and address this. Would you have ever thought that walking in on a place in Naperville would land in something like this? Or that the people who were responsible, the gentleman who didn't want to sit near you, wasn't told to, you can get up and leave too,
That's a very good question, and I think that's one of the more surprising pieces with it, that we're going into, 2020, and we still have to deal with, like we stated, systematic racism. That's probably the most surprising part about it, but, like we said, it's real, it still happens, and that's the biggest piece with us sharing the story. We didn't necessarily expect it to get what it is, but people need to know that it happens. We hear these stories. You hear about the Starbucks story. You hear about these other stories, and you say, it doesn't happen around here. This is proof that it does. And to talk a little bit more about your question with the Starbucks thing, that was a situation that had happened. You had video, but we have kids that it happened to. That's the important piece. I got to explain to my 10 and 5-year-old why we have to walk out of a restaurant. And that when they hang around with other people, because look at these beautiful kids, it's diverse. They go to school, now they have to think about, who am I around? Who's judging me? We go to another restaurant. They have to think about, who am I sitting around? Do they want us here? And me as a man, to have to get up and walk out of a restaurant when I'm supposed to be a man, a tough man, and explain that to my wife, and our friends and our kids, to have to walk out of a place going into 2020, that is the toughest part.
You are, man. You
Marcus, your thoughts? Your thoughts?
My name is
What-
Tiffany Stephens. I ran for city council back in 2012. I was the first African-American woman to run, and I applaud you all. I applaud Pastor Miller, he knows me. This is nothing new to me at all. I've experienced it. I've lived here over 20 years, and when I ran for city council, I was surprised at things that were said to me as being African-American woman and also being black. And so,
And I would say this to you, I know that that's why all of us are here.
that's right.
So I appreciate that. But
And
what
so
wanna make-
I applaud-
so I want to make sure that Marcus gets a chance to respond to that.
That's
Thank
right,
you.
and I
So-
applaud
so,
you guys for
thank you.
doing that, and I hope that we can go further, because it's a lot more things that we need to address.
Thank you.
Basically, he was talking about the day and age we live in, that you would have to encounter this, and that the guy who was having the problem with you wasn't told, you can leave instead.
I'll tell you this, and to be straightforward. Am I surprised? Was that like that was around the question that you was asking? Am I surprised? No, absolutely not. To be honest with you guys, I've experienced racism before. Right? I've felt it, seen it. Just never in an establishment, right? So surprise in Naperville? Absolutely not. Right? Absolutely not. Surprised that it happened in an establishment? Maybe a little bit. But to be in Naperville 2019, do I think it'll change in 2020? No. Absolutely not. So to answer your question, no, I'm not surprised. I'm 32 years old. This is my first time this ever happened to me in an establishment, right? It's happened outside, been called things, been treated, different ways. The only outlet is calling the police, right? Hoping somebody stands around so you can build a case. That doesn't happen for black people, right? Don't happen, right? But to be in an establishment, right, as a man, as Justin said, right, with my children, with my team, with my group, you know, it's unacceptable. And as a man, as a coach, as a mentor, as a leader, it's a responsibility that I wear the hat to show them the right way, right? It's not about me. When John made that decision to tell us to move, it wasn't about me. That left with that question, right? It became about what I represent, right? As a coach, it came about being an African American. It came about being a mentor. It came about being a leader, right? It came about showing the right way, right? That's what it became about.
You did it.
I did it.
Marcus, is there forgiveness? Would you,
One at a time. Can I get you?
is there forgiveness on your part? And I guess, will you ever go to Buffalo Wild Wings again?
I'm raised I'm raised respectfully, so I'll talk to you about the forgiveness part. I'm raised respectfully. I was raised to forgive and understand, right? And I teach my kids the same way. Obviously, that man that night, that couple that night, wasn't raised like he should have, right? So forgiveness takes a while. It's a process, and right now I'm just beginning that process, right? So as far as that goes, maybe one day, but you know that's a further conversation.
So, Mr. Lambert, next say the pastor knows the power of economic action, especially in the African American community. Should this be a moment where the African American community, or even just people of color, say to Buffalo Wild Wings and to Inspire Brands that it may be time to take your business elsewhere, perhaps boycott?
So I will tell you I'm glad you asked that question because it helps me to further respond to the question that came just before. It is Christian, it is spiritual to forgive. But as to whether or not we will go to Buffalo Wild Wings again, that's an open question. It's an open question because we need to maintain the dialogue. To answer your question about whether or not people who care about fairness should spend their money at Buffalo Wild Wings, the answer is an open question. Right now, we're concerned that it looks like no. We are hopeful that that answer will be yes, but that will rest on what Buffalo Wild Wings decides to do, and not just, by the way, here in the Chicagoland area, and not just, by the way, in Illinois, but nationwide. When we talk about being a good corporate citizen, we're talking about something, someone, an entity that has a platform. We're expecting them to use it.
Are you encouraged at all by the dialogue so far with not only city officials, but also the governor? You said you've been in touch with him. I know a Naperville councilman plans to bring it up at a meeting tonight in Naperville for the council and how they can address these issues in the future. Are you encouraged by that? Does it go far enough?
It gives you hope, right? Because if the conversation happens, change can happen. It gives you hope, right? Because if politicians recognize the reality that this cannot happen, then there's a conversation to have. If the community recognizes that this is unacceptable, it gives you hope. It gives you hope. But you have to fuel that hope. You have to give energy to that hope. And that's why all of these people are in this room. And that's why we're so grateful for the people that are in this room. Because we can't do it alone. And when Mary posted, she didn't do it alone. Because now, less than a week later, 9,000 people, 8,000 people have responded, commented on her post. You look at the Shade Room where 92,000 people have responded. So yes, it gives you hope, but we have to fuel that hope.
May I ask how the kids are doing? I mean, I know this is a very heavy conversation we're having here with adults in the room, and they're all here, so if somebody can respond, maybe one of the parents, how was that, even addressing it with the children?
Ashley Smith is going to share it.
what did you allude to? How the kids are
Just
feeling?
how are they doing? You know, I know that you all had to have that conversation. You mentioned getting into the vehicle, talking to them, you're a mentor to them. So how are they doing now, and what was that conversation like?
The conversation was tough. I mean, to be honest with you, I can't tell you I hit it on the head. I want to feel like I did. But just checking their posts over the past couple of days and how they feel, it's confusion, right? It's confusion. It's not direct. Maybe self-esteem, right? You know, you go to school with, you know, a predominantly white school. I'm speaking on my son's behalf, but now you question every restaurant you walk in now, right? You want to ask that question, like, before you even step through the door. Like, is it okay that I'm here? Am I accepted today? Right? Now you're looking at your school teacher and wondering, like, you know, is there some friction between, you know, me and you? So it's hard talking to them. It's, you know, they're so delicate because they don't understand, right? And now you're having this conversation with them. Everything's sped up right now, right? So with them, they feel like, you know, they're looking for answers. We're trying to answer to the best of our ability. And I can't guarantee you or them that my message gets home, right? Because we all got a process. We all got a light switch, right? Some understand, some don't. My youngest son is 5. My youngest son is 6. His friend is 5. They have no clue. Have no clue. So it's just, it's delicate, and it's tough. It's confusion, you know, self-esteem. It's a pot of a lot of things that's going on. So to have to live at home with that on a day-to-day basis, and I see these guys 3 times a week at least. Just trying to stay in contact and in touch and be supportive is all we can do right now. Their process is their own, essentially. Everybody has to walk this walk alone at some point, right? Right now, I just have the benefit, or we just have the benefit, to be able to have a hand and guide them through a process. And we just take it day by day for right now.
To see them try to understand is hurtful, right? Because it's something they shouldn't have to do. You look at these boys, and they're all different. And they need to know that's okay. They go to, you know, my son, Darian and Marcus, they go to, you know, Cam's house, and they go to Davion's house or Ethan's house. Every parent, every kid is different. But to know that, you know, you have someone telling you, I don't want to sit by you because you're black. They are black. And it's okay for them to be black. It's okay for them to be that way. And we're raising them to know that that's okay to be black. And as a mother, to hear that and to try to feel comfortable every time they leave that doorstep, to go anywhere, is hurtful. Because you have people like that are still looking at them as a color, right? They don't look back. These boys do some Monday through Friday, whether it's basketball or after school activities. They're not just running around doing anything wrong, you know? Every last one of those boys do something good. And that's hard to accept. I won't accept it, you know? I won't accept that there are people out there that think that it's okay to say that they're wrong, to say that they're not good enough, to say that they won't even sit next to them.
Yes. I have a comment on the question. I also say, you know, visibility that you as parents show and just demonstrating that you just lead. That was just very example. I told my daughter said there was me to your son's party, you know, and one of the things is we as women, our dignity will never be removed, especially for you kids. We don't carry
So-
I mean, this goes way back.
So,
in
so
time.
let me just say this to you. Let me just say this to you. First of all, you're human, just like me. And that's where it matters.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we receive that and appreciate that, and your sentiments and support are greatly appreciated. What we want to make sure that we do, though, is if there's some specific questions, we address them. You're right that there's a multitude of areas that need to be addressed, but frankly, we need partners in that. So not to redirect us, but in a rude way, but I do want to make sure that that if there are any specific questions, we address those.
Sure,
I mean, a specific question that's gonna be called.
Please, hold on one second.
What can I do?
Hold on, I'm sorry, hold on one second.
I was gonna ask, Mary, do you wanna talk about at all what drove you to write that post on Facebook? I mean, it's sort of where the attention all came from anyway, and what really made you wanna write that thing?
Yeah, so addressing the post itself, I am not African American, as you can see. I have friends and family who are Black, and we see that it happens. We say, with the Starbucks moment, it happens. But for it to happen to me and my family and my friends, it's something that we needed to kind of just show as an outlet to the world that this stuff does happen. My kids should be oblivious to this right now. They're children, like we said, there's young children from 5 to 11. We shouldn't have to be addressing this with them now, and it's something that, adults needed to read about. Like, we get people who are questioning whether or not this was fake, where's the video, things like that. Well, that's why I posted it without a video, because in the moment, that's not what we cared about. We didn't have any altercation. We weren't being disrespectful. We just were trying to get answers. So it wasn't of an interest to anybody around us to bust out a video and take a video of us. So there is no evidence in that form, but we lived it, we were there, so we feel it. So that's our evidence. I'm very grateful to the support that we have had with the outreach of the Facebook post. It has gone more viral than I would have expected, but it's good because, the feedback that I'm getting is that, things have happened to me and I've never spoken about it. So that should tell you altogether that that's the biggest issue itself, is that these happen and nobody speaks on it and nobody knows about it until, either somebody dies or, there's a huge altercation where then it becomes public knowledge. So we were trying to do something in a different motion to bring awareness to everybody in our community that this does happen in your backyard. It doesn't have to happen in a major city. It can happen in the suburbs of Chicago. Thank you.
This is the second time in Naperville in the recent months, if you remember the Bucky's incident a couple months ago during the summer, where there was a racially targeted incident. Have you guys decided that, are you guys going to continue shopping in Naperville? Are you guys going to continue bringing your kids in Naperville? Or are you guys even comfortable at this point, driving through Naperville?
I think that's a very good question. We're aware of the other issues, but right now our focus is and not to take anything away from any other situation. There's a lot of tough situations that go on, but right now we're here to talk about what happened with this situation. I haven't begun to even think about that. I'm trying to figure out these guys right here. They're staying right now. They're supposed to be at school. And here, they're supposed to be getting an education, so that they can get educated to get into positions where they can be powerful enough to change the world, so they don't have to do this when they get older. So I think to go back to your question, I haven't decided that. We're really just trying to get some answers. We still don't have a lot of answers. We're still in disbelief and just trying to get some answers with the whole situation.
So from the time you were granted your table to the time you left, can you give us a time frame for that? Because that was a long harassment.
It was a long time. I'd say, I don't know exactly. It was approximately about 45 minutes. okay?
So during 45 minutes, they were plotting to destroy the atmosphere you wanted to create for your children. Is that correct?
It was about 45 minutes where we sat there, and again, this whole time, we were taking the kids there to eat, so 45 minutes, these kids hadn't ate since lunchtime, and we're still sitting there waiting. So it was a pretty long time. It went by, it seemed like forever.
I
It seemed like
applaud you for being courageous.
I just want to make a comment to the city of Naperville. I would like to know what they're doing to implement the inclusion of black businesses in the area as an alternative, so we would experience the best that you experience.
So I think it's a little difficult for us to talk about the city of Naperville. I know that we're actively interested, I'm sorry. I know that we're actively interested in making the space safe and comfortable, but it's hard for us to kind of respond to that in this moment. But that is where the partnership comes in. That is why you hear me continually talk about partnership and why.
I made a comment because I know city officials are here, so.
Yeah, and there's been some outreach, and there's definite desire to continue to pursue that. If there are any specific questions, we want to kind of field those, but beyond that, then we're going to allow the families to retire. So if there's any specific questions relative to the incident, please let us know. All right. And thank you all so very much for coming. Thank you.